And so that's a win for the oil and gas industry, who's gone 2 years without getting new acreage. And they've said repeatedly during the Biden administration that they need new leases to be sort of forward-looking and secure investment for the future. Like I said, this was the first big test, and it had environmental groups really frustrated who successfully challenged this lease sale in court, but had Congress sort of go over their head and use its authority as a legislative branch to sort of put the thing over the finish line.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Sarah Westwood, and I'm here today with energy reporter Jeremy Beaman. And Jeremy, this past week we saw the Interior Department reinstate the oil lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico. That is a big deal. Why is that?
It was the first big test for the Biden administration after the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is dubbed the climate bill, but it had these oil and gas leasing provisions tucked in there in order to get Joe Manchin's vote. And so what the Interior Department did was reinstate this lease sale that it carried out last November of 2021, but that a federal judge had basically invalidated on environmental grounds, on grounds that the department failed to meet its NEPA obligations, its environmental review obligations. And so that had been appealed by the American Petroleum Institute, that decision, and it was sort of a battle that was being fought out in court. But Congress gave pretty clear direction to the department that it had to issue to reinstate this lease sale. And so that's a win for the oil and gas industry, who's gone 2 years without getting new acreage. And they've said repeatedly during the Biden administration that they need new leases to be sort of forward-looking and secure investment for the future. Like I said, this was the first big test, and it had environmental groups really frustrated who successfully challenged this lease sale in court, but had Congress sort of go over their head and use its authority as a legislative branch to sort of put the thing over the finish line.
Yeah, what were the reactions from some of those environmental groups? I mean, is the Biden administration getting pushback from the left because they did this?
The early reactions are frustration, but even before, even in the days after the IRA passed, it had been sort of foreshadowed by some of the most prominent groups out there that they would probably come back and challenge this thing. So there's not been another legal challenge leveled yet. It's just been a few days since Interior's done this, but they're probably coming.
You mentioned earlier that there were concessions made to Senator Joe Manchin in order to get him to support the Inflation Reduction Act. One of those was a promise to move forward on permitting reform. But what's going on with permitting reform on Capitol Hill right now?
It's really messy. So Republicans support permitting reform. Some of them have said they support some of the things in this very broad outline that Manchin's office circulated after the IRA passed, but they don't really have a whole lot of political incentive to sort of help Manchin and Chuck Schumer really finalize this side deal, as everyone's calling it, payback scheme, as Lindsey Graham dubbed it. So Republicans went ahead and introduced a bill of their own, a permitting reform bill of their own, with Manchin's fellow West Virginian Shelley Moore Capito leading that bill. And so to compare them is hard because the Manchin deal still sort of exists in a one-pager format. We have all this list of things that he wants. And that apparently have been agreed to, but no actual legislative language. So Republicans released their own bill, and almost the entire caucus has gotten behind it. 45 Senate Republicans, I think, have co-sponsored it. So anyway, all that to say, there's sort of these dueling efforts right now, and Manchin is trying to, there's been reporting, and people have told me too, that he's trying to get industry groups to work with Republicans and convince Republicans to sort of get on board with his effort. Now, remember that Democrats are the decision makers. They decide what legislation can sort of come up and how it comes up. And Schumer has said that he's going to bring the permitting reform deal along with a government funding bill. And so that would make Democrats vote on everything together, and liberals in the House and some in the Senate, especially Bernie Sanders, have said they don't want to face that possibility because they don't support a lot of these permitting reform efforts.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more reporting from Jeremy and the rest of the Energy team by signing up for their newsletter, Daily on Energy, at washingtonexaminer.com.